I took a life at 19. Nobody knew. But I did. I don't remember what the sky looked like that night. Just the color of the dashboard lights and how my hands kept slipping on the steering wheel because I was sweating so much. I was 19. That reckless, arrogant kind of 19 where you think the world owes you forgiveness before you even sin. My parents had gone to bed early, thinking I was too tired to go out. I wasn't. I was wired, restless, full of bad decisions and vodka I wasn't supposed to touch. They had this old Buick, big and heavy, like something out of a movie. I still remember the click the garage door made when it opened, too loud, too slow. But nobody woke up. I backed out into the street, headlights off until I turned the corner. I wasn't even going anywhere important. Just driving. I used to do that when I was anxious. Back then I thought it was freedom. In hindsight, it was just running in circles. The crash happened on a winding hill about 10 minutes from my house. The road curved like a snake and dipped under a railroad bridge. No streetlights, just trees and shadows. I didn't see them until their headlights hit me. They were in a small car, silver, maybe gray, I don't know. Everything happened too fast. My tires skidded. I felt the scream rise in my throat, but it never made it out. Then the sound, metal collapsing, glass breaking, the horrible crunch of impact. And silence. For a second, I thought I had died. The airbag had gone off, my nose was bleeding, and my ears were ringing so hard I couldn't tell if the world was still moving. Then I heard it. Someone crying. From the other car. I panicked. I remember fumbling for the door handle like a madwoman. My legs felt numb. I stumbled out, nearly fell to my knees, and saw them. 3 people. One was already still, slumped against the dashboard. One was screaming, no, wailing from the back seat, twisted at a horrible angle. The third was moving, just barely. I took a step forward, then another, and then I ran. I don't know why. I could say fear, but that's not enough. It was a primal, instinctual terror. The kind that tells you, if you stay here, your life is over. I darted into the trees, scraped my arms on the underbrush, and didn't stop until I was 2 blocks away. I circled back for the car later, ditched it in an abandoned lot, wiped it down with a shirt I found in the trunk, walked home in silence. My knees shook with every step. No sirens came that night. I climbed back into my bed, fully clothed, the blood on my shirt hidden under the blanket. I stared at the ceiling and waited for the knock that never came. I thought I had survived, but I hadn't. Not really. When the sun rose, it didn't feel like morning. It felt like judgment, like the light itself knew what I had done. I stood in the shower for nearly an hour, scrubbing my skin until it burned. I threw my clothes into a trash bag and hid it deep in the bin behind a gas station miles away. Every time a car drove by, I flinched. Every time someone spoke, I was sure it would be about the crash. But no one suspected me. Not my parents. Not my friends. Not the police. The next day, the news broke. Fatal collision under Westbridge rail crossing. 2 dead. 1 in critical condition. They showed photos of the wreckage. A silver sedan crushed like a soda can. 1 body still inside when emergency crews arrived. The survivor, just 20 years old, was in the ICU. I sat in our living room while my mom folded laundry, watching it all unfold on TV, nodding like it was just another tragedy in a world full of them. I nodded too. I even said something like, "That's awful," in a voice that didn't sound like mine. The investigation didn't go anywhere. The car that hit them never stopped. Witnesses were scarce. The cameras near the underpass weren't working that night. Some issue with city maintenance. All they had were tire marks and some broken plastic. Nothing traceable. I started going out less, eating less, sleeping almost not at all. I couldn't look in mirrors without hating what looked back. I was always expecting someone to figure it out, a classmate, a cop, a neighbor. But they didn't. The world moved on. I didn't. The guilt was like static in my chest, always humming, always ready to spark. I thought about turning myself in. I thought about writing a letter to the families. I even typed it once, an anonymous confession. But I never sent it. Cowardice won. College became impossible. I dropped classes, failed exams. My GPA tanked. I told my parents I was overwhelmed. They believed me. They always believed me. One night, I drove past the crash site. I hadn't meant to, but my hands turned the wheel like they had their own plans. There were flowers on the guardrail. A little wooden cross nailed into a tree. Someone had painted their names in silver on a piece of stone. I got out of the car and stared at the names. I didn't know them, but I knew everything that mattered. I knew they had families. I knew they had futures. And I took both. I stood there in the dark, waiting for some kind of punishment. A sign, a voice, a cop to pull up behind me. But nothing came. Just the wind and my own shallow breathing. I realized that night I had escaped justice, but not guilt. And guilt, I was starting to learn, is a prison with no windows. The first year was the worst, though I didn't realize that at the time. Back then, I still believed it would get easier. I kept thinking, if I just make it through this week, if I can just forget it for one day. But memory has claws, and guilt is a whisper you never stop hearing. I dropped out of college by the second semester, told my parents I wasn't ready, said I wanted to take a break and figure things out. They supported me, of course. I had always been the good kid. They never questioned the sudden change in me, never asked why I stopped seeing my friends, or why I barely left my room. Sleep was a joke. I'd lie awake until 3, for in the morning, then doze off just before dawn. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the crash. That curve. The lights. The faces I barely glimpsed, but would never forget. One of them was a girl, maybe my age. I remembered her wrist, thin, delicate, dangling out of the window when I ran. That image haunted me more than anything else. Not the blood, not the scream, just that wrist, limp in the air like a flag at half-mast. I tried to keep busy, picked up shifts at a local diner, washed dishes, smiled at customers. I don't know how I did it, pretending like I was normal, like I hadn't stolen lives out from under the stars. Every laugh I forced felt like a lie. Every paycheck felt like something I didn't deserve. And still, no one came knocking. I started looking them up online. I remembered the names from the news. I found old photos on memorial pages. Smiling faces. Friends commenting, "Miss you." Birthdays that never got celebrated again. I found out the girl who died was studying nursing. The boy had been a mechanic's apprentice. The survivor was their friend. He had been in a coma for weeks. I read that last part 3 times, then threw up in the sink. They were real, not just victims in a news clip. Real people with messy lives and dumb jokes and playlists and text messages from moms they never replied to. And me, some stupid drunk 19-year-old who thought night drives were romantic, I ended all of that. I started writing letters I'd never send. Pages of apologies. Descriptions of what happened that night. Sometimes I'd burn them. Other times I'd hide them in books, pressed between pages like wilted flowers of guilt. I hated myself. Not in a dramatic, teenage angst way. It was deeper. Like living with a rot inside your chest that you can't cut out. You smile. You eat. You work. But you're always aware that you're wearing someone else's life. One you didn't earn. I didn't know how to go forward, but I also didn't know how to go back. So I stayed still, and slowly, life moved around me like I was just another grave by the side of the road. It's strange what becomes normal when you carry a secret like mine. Guilt stopped being a sharp pain and settled into something dull and constant, like living with a low-grade fever. I learned to function around it, to smile at coworkers, to laugh at someone's stupid story in the break room. But inside, I was always somewhere else. I never went back to school. Every time I thought about applying again, something in me shriveled up. It wasn't just fear of being found out. It was the belief that I didn't deserve a future. What right did I have to pursue a degree when I'd taken away someone's chance to graduate? To have a career? To live? I bounced between jobs. Nothing that required background checks. Nothing permanent. Receptionist. Stock clerk. Dog walker. Once I got a job as a temp at a dentist's office, and they told me I might be a good fit long-term. I quit the next day. The idea of putting down roots anywhere felt wrong, like building a home on stolen ground. I never dated seriously. I couldn't. The idea of someone loving me, trusting me, it made my stomach turn. Every time a man got too close, I pulled away. I always had an excuse. I'm just not ready. I have a lot going on. Truth was, I couldn't bear the thought of intimacy when I knew what I had done. I didn't want to be seen. Not really. Therapy? God, I wanted to. I needed to. But I was terrified. What if I told them everything and they reported me? Could they? I Googled it 100 times. The laws were murky. I never took the risk. My parents eventually stopped asking why I seemed so distant. I think they assumed life had just worn me down. In a way, it had. Just not the way they thought. Every anniversary of the crash, I'd lock myself in my apartment and light 3 candles. 1 for each person in that car. 2 who died. 1 who lived but would never be the same. I didn't know why I did it. Maybe penance. Maybe superstition. Maybe just because I didn't want their memory to disappear entirely. I owed them at least that much. Sometimes I'd drive past the site again. It changed over the years. The flowers faded. The cross got repainted. Once someone left a teddy bear with a note in a child's handwriting. That one broke me. I sat in my car for an hour, sobbing like the 19-year-old coward I'd been. The survivor, his name was Nate, I found out, started a non-profit in memory of his friends. I followed it online like a ghost. Fundraisers, photos, smiling faces. He limped in every picture, but he was alive. He was trying to do good. And I was just existing. Trapped in a purgatory I'd built myself. I wasn't living. I was serving a sentence no judge had given, but one I could never finish. I didn't mean to find his name. I really didn't. It started with a late-night spiral on an old news archive site. One article led to another, then a fundraiser page, then a social media profile. His name was Nate. He'd been sitting in the back seat that night, the only one who made it out alive. He wasn't unscathed, not even close. The crash had broken his spine in 2 places, multiple surgeries, a long, grueling recovery. The first photo I found of him post-accident showed him in a hospital bed, wires tangled everywhere, one eye blackened, a cast on his leg, and that look people have when they're alive, but not sure why. I sat there staring at the screen until the page blurred. Over the years, I kept tabs on him. Quietly, pathetically. I watched from behind the curtain of the internet as he clawed his way back into life. He learned to walk again with a cane. He went back to school, got a degree in social work. And then, this part broke me, he started a foundation in the names of his 2 friends who didn't make it. It wasn't a flashy organization. Just local work, community outreach, driver safety seminars, scholarships for underprivileged teens. But every photo I saw, every quote from him in the local paper, was steeped in the same thing: grief turned into purpose. He smiled in photos. Not the kind of smile you give for a camera, but the kind you build over time like scar tissue. He got married, had a daughter, And here I was, nearly 3 decades old, sitting in a one-bedroom apartment with dead houseplants and a box of unsent letters, too afraid to speak, too broken to move forward. There were times I imagined writing to him, anonymous at first. Just a message saying, "I'm sorry." I wrote the drafts over and over again in my head, but I never sent a word. I told myself it was because he deserved peace, that dragging up the past would only reopen wounds. But that wasn't the truth. The truth was, I was terrified he'd say exactly what I believed about myself, that I was a monster, that I didn't deserve forgiveness. Once, during one of my darker moments, I drove to his nonprofit's building, just parked across the street and watched from behind the wheel. It was raining. I saw him walk out the front door with his cane, shielding himself with a worn black umbrella. He paused to help an elderly woman carry something to her car. I watched, frozen, the way you might watch someone you betrayed who still somehow manages to be good. That was the night I finally said it out loud. Not just in my head, not just in writing. "I did this to you," I whispered, "and I'm so goddamn sorry." But the rain drowned my voice and no one heard me, not even him. It happened on a Tuesday. I was at work, sorting through a pile of invoices in the back room of the warehouse. My manager was arguing with someone on the phone, and the fluorescent lights above me flickered just enough to make my head throb. I bent over, rubbing my temple, and that's when it hit me sharp, blinding pain radiating from my ribs all the way to my spine. At first, I thought it was stress, or a pulled muscle, but by the next day, I couldn't breathe without wincing. A friend at work convinced me to go to urgent care. They sent me for scans. Blood work. More tests. "There's a spot," the doctor said. "Could be nothing. Could be something. We need to investigate further." I sat in that sterile white room, nodding like I understood what was happening. But I didn't. All I could think was, this is it. I'm going to die before I ever tell the truth. That night, I went home and drank. Not enough to get drunk, just enough to feel something besides panic. I curled up on my floor and cried like a child. Not because I was scared of dying, but because I didn't want to go without making things right. It wasn't cancer. Just a benign mass, inflammation, something treatable. But the fear it sparked didn't go away. If anything, it left something raw and open inside me. I started waking up every day with a single question: what am I still waiting for? I began to see my life like a slow-burning punishment. No achievements. No love. No peace. Just day after day of surviving when I didn't feel like I was allowed to live. I hadn't spoken to my parents in weeks. My dad had left a voicemail about Thanksgiving. I never called back. How could I? What would I bring to the table? A casserole and a 27-year-old secret? The idea of living another 30 years like this made me physically ill. One night, I pulled out every letter I'd written but never sent. Pages and pages of sorrow, apologies, confessions, each one more desperate than the last. I scattered them across my bed like they were evidence in a trial I'd been avoiding for nearly 3 decades. And then I wrote one more. Not to the police. Not to Nate. Not even to the families of the people I killed. To myself. I know what you did. I know what you're still doing. Hiding, running, punishing, surviving. But you're not healing. You're not alive. You're a ghost in your own story. I folded the letter, placed it on my nightstand, and sat in the dark, staring at nothing. I wasn't suicidal. Not exactly. But I was done. Done pretending. Done carrying it alone. Done waiting for a justice that would never come on its own. I didn't want to die, but I didn't want to keep living like this either. I spent the next few days in a daze, like someone floating above their own life. I still went to work. Still smiled at the woman who brought her dog in for grooming. Still made small talk with the barista who remembered my name. But inside, I wasn't there. I was somewhere between a confession and an ending. The nightmares came back full force. The curve in the road, the screech, the silence. Sometimes I'd wake up with my heart pounding, hands gripping the sheets like a steering wheel. Other nights, I'd just lay awake, eyes open, staring at the ceiling, rehearsing what I would say, how I would begin. I called a lawyer. Not a flashy one, just someone local with a calm voice who didn't ask too many questions up front. I didn't give my name, just said, if someone wanted to confess to a crime from almost 30 years ago, would it still matter? He said it would, especially if lives were lost. Closure doesn't expire, he said. Neither does guilt, apparently. I started drafting a real letter, this time to the police. No aliases, no metaphors, just facts. The date, the car, the road, my name. I didn't send it. Not yet. Instead, I posted my story online. Not the letter, just the truth. I didn't use my real name, but I didn't hide either. It was a confession. A last-ditch attempt to scream into the void and see if anyone heard me. I watched the screen after I hit post, hands trembling, and the responses came in. Some people were brutal, called me a murderer, a coward, said I deserved to rot. Others were gentler, not forgiving, not excusing, but human. They asked questions. They shared stories of their own pain. Some even thanked me for telling the truth, finally. I didn't know what I expected, but I sat there for hours reading every single comment. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel completely alone. The next morning, I walked to the mailbox with the envelope in my hand. Inside was the letter, the full truth, signed and dated. I stood there for a long time, holding it above the slot. And I froze. What would happen to me? Would they arrest me right away? Would my parents finally learn what their good daughter had hidden all these years? Would Nate see my name in the paper and finally know who stole his friends? My fingers trembled. I couldn't do it. Not yet. I turned around and walked home, the envelope still in my hand, heart pounding like a verdict. I sat on my couch and stared at the wall until the sun went down. I knew I couldn't keep living this way, but I didn't know how to change it yet. I just knew one thing with more clarity than anything else. I don't want to do this anymore. I can't. Not like this. I really want to finish my life. Updated. Thanks, Reddit, for all your comments. I understand those who tell me to go to the police and tell them everything. Some of you were harsh, and you had every right to be. Others offered something I didn't expect. Grace. I never thought anyone would read my post, let alone care. I figured I'd hit publish, scream into the abyss, and that would be the end of it. But something strange happened. People saw me. Now I'm going to answer some of your questions. Yes, it was a Buick LeSabre. Navy blue. I took it without permission while my parents were asleep. I don't even think they noticed the dented fender the next day. My dad assumed it had happened at the store parking lot. He was so focused on work, he didn't look too closely. I didn't go to the hospital. I had a bloody nose, some bruises, but nothing major. No one saw me that night. No traffic cams, no other drivers on the road. That's why the police had nothing to go on. I remember one article saying, it's like the other car vanished. It didn't vanish. It parked itself in an empty lot behind a burned-down bowling alley and sat there for 3 days before someone towed it. I still can't believe no one put it together. I know many of you asked why I didn't come forward earlier. That question gutted me. I've asked myself that every day for 27 years. The truth is, I was scared. At first, it was panic. Then it became habit. And over time, it hardened into shame. It got too big to touch. And yes, I've thought about therapy. Hundreds of times. But the idea that a therapist might be a mandatory reporter terrified me. I know, not every situation qualifies. But I couldn't take the risk. I didn't want to go to jail, and I didn't want anyone to see who I really was. Not until now. Several people asked about the victims. 2 people died that night. A woman named Margot and a man named Kevin. I never knew them. I still don't know much, but I've memorized their faces from online tributes, seen the comments from their families, friends. Kevin was a mechanic. Margot wanted to be a nurse. They were young. Stupidly young, like me. Nate survived. I've mentioned him already. His foundation still runs. Still helps people. I've watched him from the sidelines for years, unable to look away. He's stronger than I ever was. Stronger than I'll ever be. You're probably wondering what I'll do next. I don't know yet, but I'm closer than I've ever been. I don't want to live in the shadow anymore. I don't want to wake up every day feeling like a thief wearing someone else's skin. Something has to change. And maybe, just maybe, it starts with walking into that police station. I'm scared, but I'm not running anymore. 2 days after I wrote that update, I called the police. Not 911. I'm not that dramatic. I looked up the number for the non-emergency line of the town where the crash happened. My voice was shaking so badly I had to hang up the first time without saying a word. The second time, I got through. I told them I had information about an old hit-and-run case from 1996. The woman on the line asked if I had a tip to submit. I said no. I said I was the one who did it. They transferred me to a detective. He asked if I could come in. I did. The next morning, I got on a bus. I didn't trust myself to drive. I brought the envelope I'd sealed weeks earlier, the one I couldn't bring myself to mail. I held it in my lap the entire way like it was a living thing. The police station hadn't changed much. I sat in the lobby for a long time before anyone called me back. When the detective, a man named Langston, met me, he didn't smile. He just held the door open and asked me to have a seat. I told him everything. I cried more than I expected to. He didn't interrupt. Just took notes, asked clarifying questions. I gave him the date, the location, the car, the timeline. Everything I remembered. Which, it turns out, was a lot. Trauma doesn't let you forget. When I finished, he just nodded and said, "We'll need to reopen the case. You understand this means a formal investigation." I nodded. They didn't arrest me that day. I guess because it's not that simple. Old cases take time. Statutes of limitations don't apply to deaths, but they still have to verify, confirm, build a case. I was told not to leave the state, that I'd be contacted soon. And then I left the station. Just like that. No handcuffs. No courtroom. Not yet. That night, I slept better than I had in years. Updated again. I didn't think I'd be posting anymore. I figured once I confessed, that would be the end of this, at least publicly. But I've gotten messages from people asking what happened after the police visit. So here it is. I'm under house arrest now. They officially reopened the case, and after reviewing my statement and comparing it to what little evidence they had left, the district attorney decided there was enough to move forward with charges. Vehicular manslaughter. Fleeing the scene. The legal terminology doesn't matter as much as the truth. I did it, and now the justice system is finally catching up. There's an ankle monitor. There are weekly check-ins. My lawyer, yes, I have one now, says we'll likely go to trial in a few months. There's talk of a plea deal, but nothing's decided yet. I'm not fighting this. I just want to see it through. I've spoken with Nate. Yes, him. The police contacted him as part of the process, and after a few days, he reached out through the DA's office. He wanted to talk. I didn't expect that. I didn't feel like I deserved it. But I said yes. We didn't meet in person, just a call, mediated, monitored. I was so nervous I could barely speak. And then he said, "I don't know if I can forgive you, but I needed to hear you say it." And I did. I told him everything. I told him I was sorry, that I'd been sorry every day of my life. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I've lived in the shadow of that night for so long. Maybe it helps to know you were living there too." That broke something in me. Not out of relief, not out of forgiveness, just truth. Since the confession, I've started seeing a therapist. Legally cleared, confidential. For the first time, I'm speaking without fear, telling the story from start to finish. All the rot I've carried for nearly 3 decades is finally coming to the surface. And yes, I feel better. Not fixed, not redeemed, but lighter. Like I've finally set down a weight I was never meant to carry alone. I don't know what the court will decide. Maybe prison. Maybe more house arrest. I'll accept whatever comes. I understand that no punishment can bring back Margot or Kevin. Nothing can restore what I destroyed. But I also know this. For 27 years, I denied myself any peace, any love, any future. I didn't allow myself to live. And now, finally, I am. Even if it's within 4 walls and a tracking bracelet. Even if I never leave this apartment again. Because now, the world knows the truth. And so do I. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Take care.